Well, we're all getting older, aren't we? And of course that brings its difficulties in all walks of life. But in running, I mean, running can be quite a nice analogue for life. And should we give ourselves a bit more recovery? Should we have more rest days? And that's a question that comes up frequently. The literature typically would say that, yeah, you should have more rest and more recovery, and perhaps that would arguably suggest you should have more rest days. I'm not totally convinced on that. I think it depends, like most things in sport and endurance training. It depends on your background, your experience, how much training you're used to recently, how much training you've done over the years, whether you're prone to injury and these sort of things, and specifically what works for you. So I can give you a couple of, a bit of anecdotal evidence. I've got a couple of, well, one friend and one person that I coach. So one of my friends, he was, well, it was really when he was in his late 40s. He's about, I think he's about my age, so he's in his mid to late 50s now. And he found when he was in late 40s, he was trying to modify his training to be consistent with what he felt to be the general lines that people should follow. And he found he was getting worse, which you would expect as you get older, but you don't expect a lot of decline in performance if you're training regularly in your mid to late 40s. And what he decided to do is just train like he used to when he was younger, and that works for him, and he improved quite a lot, and he started performing reasonably well at he was in Britain, he's Irish, he's performing reasonably well at home international competitions, and now in his mid to late 50s he's actually on a national level and home in the UK he's pretty good. He's winning age groups in the vets competitions and finishing reasonably well up in the overall vets competitions against much younger athletes. So basically that change to going back to what he used to do has paid dividends for him, and not paying too much attention to what the trends are or the recommendations seem to be for people who are in the ageing process. I also, somebody that I coached recently, he decided to run every day. And when I started working with him, he asked me, well, do you think this is a good idea? And because he'd been doing it for several months, and I thought, well, it's obviously working for him. So why would we change something that's working for him? He's obviously able to recover by running every day, so he didn't actually need any rest days. His runs were very short, so I think he's running a couple of miles, 3 to 5 kilometres on his easy days, but he was still running every day. So he was taking no rest days. And he developed his fitness, and he's running. He had a training history. He'd run some marathons in the past, and then had a break, and then come back to running. And he'd created new challenges because he didn't want to be influenced by the times he's run in the past, because he realised that at 70, in his 70s, he was not going to be able to run the times that he could when he was in his 50s, and that's just the reality of the situation for everybody. Unless you've not run at all until you start training in your 70s, and then of course you can run personal best times. So he developed his fitness up to running 50 kilometres, and he's getting faster. He's done 2 now, and his second one was much faster than his first one, and so he's improving on his recent history of performances. So running every day works for him. He does 2 or 3 harder sessions a week, maybe 2, 1 interval session and 1 long run typically, and that works very nicely for him, and I'm looking forward to the next event that he chooses to enter. So there are 2 examples of people who have not taken more rest days as they got older. The way I like to look at it is that everybody's an individual, because there's so many variables that are involved, particularly as you're getting older. Once you get to 40, then you've got 40 years of life experience. You might have run when you were at school, you might have done nothing, got really overweight and really unhealthy, and then come back to it. Or you might have continued to run or do some other sporting events in the period of time from your 20s to your 40s. And similarly, that's almost double once you get into your 70s, another 50% on your 40s once you're into your 60s. and 70s. So that's more life experience and more variables and more things that come into play. So I would adopt the same principles that I adopt in any training plan. So they're overload, so you have to do a bit more than you used to stress your body and make it adapt. Specificity, you have to train specifically for your event or specifically for what changes you want to make. So I'll sort of explain that a little bit, because in specificity, if you're just starting out, then you would train specifically for your event and do things that are similar to your event. But as you become more experienced over the years, then you would train specifically to address your weaknesses so that you could play to your strengths and minimise the losses due to your weaknesses in your chosen event. So the variability in your training becomes higher, and you might not be doing, like you might notice that you've got some sort of weakness, and you might choose to take some time, minimise the amount of running that you're doing and do some strength work or something like that, because you're then addressing a weakness that you can then build into your plan for future events. So specificity is important, but it's specific to your specific goals, so to speak. And then the third one is progressive, but I sort of think the word, if you're overloading your system, then it's got to be progressive. So I don't know really why that's used as a third training principle, because it's basically implied by the other two. Knowing that we are going to have 2 or 3 hard sessions in the week, and by a hard session I might mean a long session or a high intensity session, or sometimes if you were training for maybe a half marathon or something, or a marathon, you might want to do a fairly high intensity long session. So there's a really good book by Charlie Spedding, From Last to First, and he does some really good interval sessions that are really long that he uses to train specifically for the marathons. And as you may or may not know, he won an Olympic marathon medal. And it's a great book both for this psychological approach that he takes to his training and his racing, as well as the way he approaches his training physically, and goes a bit against the grain of convention. Sorry, I lost track a little bit now. We're working from first principles, which is what I would do with everybody, and then I would set up the specific hard sessions that people need to go towards their goals, and then fill in the rest with easier training. And the way the easier training would really dictate how many rest days you might have, or basically your life commitments and your schedule. As we talked about with the 70-year-old runner, it's not necessary to have rest days, but it can be useful, and I think a rest day gives you a mental break as much as a physical break. And in general, I would include 1 or 2 rest days in a week for most athletes. So it's not really a case of how old you are, it's a case of what you specifically need. So you build in these hard sessions, and you determine whether you can manage 2 hard sessions a week, 1 hard session a week, or 3 hard sessions a week, whether they be high intensity sessions or long sessions that you will take time to recover from. And then you work out whether you can recover from those by doing easy running, or whether you need complete rest. But it's still very important to do your easy endurance training and not just do everything hard, because you're still building up your aerobic capacity. And also you can find that most people find that they can recover by doing fairly short and endurance-paced runs that are at a comfortable conversational pace. And doing those runs, as well as being quite enjoyable, are also very beneficial in developing that aerobic fitness. So I hope you found that useful. Like and subscribe, please check out my other videos, and please comment. I really like getting comments and questions so that I can interact, and it's the interaction that I find motivating, and hopefully I can help you get fitter and faster and achieve your goals. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.